Hi everybody, it's Dr. E. I just wanted to touch base with you about what I'm asking you to do this week in your discussions. We're going to focus most of our attention on our paper topic discussion because it's a little bit more intensive. But just briefly, the general discussion area, you're going to watch a video and offer your kind of annotation or summary of it with some analysis and connection, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up our D2L page and just go over a few things. So this is what you'll see. First is going to be a reminder, just because I don't want anybody to be confused. It reminds you that your weekly discussion areas, they're always going to be due on either Wednesday or Friday by 11:59 p.m. I don't want this area to confuse you. If you see where I am with my mouse, I don't want you to think, well, everything's due by April 25th, right? Everything is going to be due earlier than that. April 25th is just going to be when those discussion areas close and you can no longer see or post in those. So don't be confused by that. Always keep on your mind that Wednesdays and Fridays are going to be the due days, okay? So if I look at the paper topic for this week and click on that discussion area, it will take me to the instructions for this week. So I do have some links here for choice work, either in PDF format or if that's not something you can use or open with your technology, you can click on this and go to the actual website where her work is posted. The first thing I want you to do is to go back to that article. We've worked on it a lot this semester, but we probably need to dust off a few cobwebs and just kind of refamiliarize ourselves with her ideas. If you have your printed article with your notes and highlights and everything on it, that's great, right? But if not, that's okay. Just refresh your memory. And what I want you to do is identify a quote that you would, if you were writing a research paper, a quote that you would use to support your ideas, okay? We've talked about that Choi makes a lot of general statements about food that we can all pull into our papers, right? So what we want to do, at least with what we're working on right now, is not focus on finding that perfect quote that immediately connects to that food memory that we identified last week. So if we take mine as an example, last week I kind of shared that a strong food memory I have is about a cake that my dad made for me. I'm not going to go into Choi's article and look specifically for a quote about cake, right? That's just impossible, right? And it's just not something that you're going to be able to do with research in the future. You're going to find some sort of quote that helps support your ideas in a more general way, right? But we always want to be really ethical researchers, which means we're not just picking and choosing. We may read this article by an author and most of the information is not connected to what we're talking about, and even the quote that we choose may not actually help support our ideas. The author may be making a whole other argument. So to be an ethical researcher, we want to make sure that not only the quote that we're using is connected, but generally the topic being addressed in the article or the book chapter or whatever source we're using, that connects, right? So to be ethical, we want to show that we've done our research, okay? So once you choose a quote, if I'm back in the discussion area, the second thing is I want you to offer a paragraph, a shorter paragraph of 4 to 5 sentences to just kind of give us a bit of context, right? What is this quote about? What are we doing with this quote? So in college writing, we want to make sure that we, again, are ethical and we're not using somebody else's words out of context, right? We can show that the author is generally sharing ideas that are connected to what we're describing overall, okay? So I'm going to use an example to kind of give some more detail about this, but I want to go through the instructions first. So finally, in a longer paragraph of 6 to 7 sentences, I want you to use that quote that you've chosen, that you can connect to your ideas and actually do that, right? So go back to that memory from last week and take that quote and apply it to that memory. Do not copy and paste what you wrote last week, right? That is considered plagiarism. I want you to write a new paragraph about that same memory, but use a quote of choice to kind of tie in, right? It's showing that we can use that research and we can connect it properly following MLA guidelines and formats, but also show that we can connect ideas overall, okay? So the 6 to 7 sentences is because it takes more space for you to use research. You need to introduce that quote, you need to offer that quote, and then you need to explain the relevance, right? Explain how it's connected. We don't just want to drop quotes into our work. That's not being ethical, and that will produce problems down the line when it comes to using research, okay? So I want you to remember that this is our longer, kind of more intensive discussion post for the week. So it's due by Friday at 11:59 p.m. But you also need to respond to 2 of your colleagues, okay? So make sure that you're allowing time for that, because everything is due on the same day and the same time. So don't wait until 11:55 to write your response, because you also need to respond to 2 other people by that same time, okay? Just throwing that out there. I know none of you will do that, but just in case, okay? So if I'm going back to my original idea about that cake that was important to me, I want to connect it to Choi's work, right? So if I have Choi's work right here, this is the actual website where her work is posted. And I'm just going to choose a quote that, again, is general. It's something that I can connect to my overall ideas. So I'm going to choose this quote. I mean, it's immediate. And if you can see that, she writes, "Food feeds the soul." Right? And then she goes on, "To the extent that we all eat food and we all have souls, food is the single great unifier across cultures." Right? So just something general. And then she starts to share her own experience. So again, go back and take a look at her work. So I'm just going to click copy and go to a Word document and paste that. Okay, so again, with Word, it's the worst. We want to make sure in future writing of papers that we're, in 12-point font, Times New Roman, right? But we are working with the discussion area. So we are a little bit more limited in what we need to do, but we need to make sure that we're doing that for our future papers when we're not in a semester that is absolutely crazy, right? And I am just scrolling for no reason. So y'all know me, I like Times New Roman, and so I'm going to change, if it'll do that. Right now I'll just change it to Georgia just for simplicity. And remember, everything's 12-point font, right? So food feeds the soul. So if I just put that in, I am plagiarizing, right? I need to use those quotation marks at the front and at the back. And then I need to give Choi credit, right? So that is the quote. That's the first thing I want to see in your discussion post, right? And then below that, I want you to have that paragraph that then kind of identifies what the context is. So I would go on to write, Amy Choi writes her article about all the various meanings of food across cultures. So I'm just kind of offering a brief summary and then saying, she starts off with this quote, right? She starts off by saying that food feeds the soul. And then I'm going to start my other paragraph below that, and I'm going to just identify, going back to that memory, right? So when I was turning 13 years old, my father made a special birthday cake for that celebration. It was a difficult time. No possessive. So I want you to note that even though I have Choi in parentheses up at the top when I just identify that quote, here, because I've mentioned her name in the actual sentence, I don't need to go back and repeat that information. But as I've said before in class, if you want to do that just to make absolutely sure there's no question about your source information, then by all means, I don't think any professor is going to count off because you have just covered all bases and included that name again. But for, our purposes, just know that you don't need to do that, right? So I have talked a little bit about my experience. I've noted the quote, right? And now I want to explain it, right? So, Choi identifies all the ways that food is important to us on various levels. And this quote really identifies or really connects to the importance of how my father's cake made me feel. It nourished me. So we're playing with words a little bit, right? So playing on that idea that food feeds the soul, right? So I'm making sure I've identified her, right, and the article. If you want to go a step further, and I would definitely recommend this in your future full-on research paper writing, you want to note who that person is, right? Amy Choi is a journalist. She writes in various areas, and she's published articles in different areas. So she's just not some Joe Schmo off the street, right? We can identify that she is working to produce something and following kind of ethical journalistic guidelines, right? What I also want you to make sure that you're thinking about is for future papers, how you create a works cited page, right? How you take all the information on the publication of this article and then put that together and create a works cited page. That's something you're going to be required to do next week with the Brown article. So what I want to do is take you to the Purdue Online Writing Lab website. This is something I've encouraged y'all to use in the past. I know it can be overwhelming, right? So on the left-hand side, you just want to make sure that MLA is chosen, and there are links in D2L, so don't worry about that just yet. And what I want you to think about also is that there's a whole section on in-text citations. So I'm just over here, in-text citations, the basics, and it shows you how to utilize quotes. So all the stuff that I just talked about, okay? I also want you to note that in Choi's work, she uses a lot of quotes from other people, and there's a specific way to do that, right? So if you want to quote Jennifer 8 Lee, this is something that we've talked about. If you use a quote that's by another person, you need to make sure that you're identifying and giving credit to not only the speaker, but the original author, right? So what you want to do is make sure that you're taking a look at what we call indirect citations. So if you look, I'm here in MLA in-text citations, the basics. And if you scroll down, don't pay any attention. I'm just going to find it. There's a lot of information. There's a whole section on citing indirect sources, and that's essentially what you're doing if you're using Choi's article, but then referencing somebody else in there. So you want to make sure that you put QTD period in and then Choi essentially, and give credit to the original speaker here. So Jennifer 8 Lee notes that quoted in Choi. Okay, so look at that when you have a little bit more time. Briefly, I want to also walk through, there's a citation generator at the top here. So you can go through that process to then find the citation for the future work that we're going to talk about that. And I'll go over that in next week's video, just because I don't want this to run on too long, but I want you to just kind of familiarize yourself with this area. Some of you have used this site before, but it may have been a while. Okay, so just make sure that you're following those MLA guidelines. And I always suggest that you use Microsoft Word to draft and then double check, edit. You can see I have a red squiggly line here. Do I need to go and correct anything? Do I have any grammar errors that are squiggly with green? And then you can just copy everything and paste it into the discussion area of D2L. Okay, so if y'all have any questions about this week's longer paper topic discussion, just post them in the Q&A area. Again, you can email me, but if you have that question, other people probably do as well. So post it for everybody and I'll work to answer those questions. But that's also a place where you can talk to one another. Okay, I hope you're doing well. Good luck this week in all of your classes, and let me know if you're running into any issues. Okay, all right.